On June 14th, 2003, a 5-year-old girl walked barefoot to her friend's house in Chisholm, Minnesota. By 5:15 in the evening, she had vanished without a trace. Over the next 22 years, over 100 search operations were launched. But the moment LeeAnna Warner's scent trail ended abruptly at the edge of a road, it became clear someone had been waiting for her. What happened in those 15 minutes would haunt an entire community for more than 2 decades. Share with me where you hear things from. The phone calls started at 5:30 in the evening. Kaylin Warner moved quickly through the neighborhood, her voice growing more urgent with each house she passed. "Have you seen Beener? Have you seen my daughter?" Neighbors stepped onto their porches, shaking their heads. Children playing in yards stopped their games and joined the search. The street felt too quiet, the summer air too still. Something was wrong. Everyone could feel it. But in those early moments, no one wanted to say what they were all thinking. To understand what was lost that afternoon, you need to know who LeeAnna Warner was. LeeAnna Susan Marie Warner, Beener, to everyone who knew her, had been called that since the day she was born, January 21st, 1998. She was so small at birth that the nickname stuck. Even as she grew into a spirited, fearless 5-year-old, she stood just over 3 feet tall, with brown hair cut into a bob that bounced when she ran. Her brown eyes would light up when she laughed, which was often. She had a small dimple on her left shoulder that her mother loved to kiss, and a tiny mole just above her left ankle from all the times she'd scraped it climbing trees. LeeAnna was a walking contradiction in the best possible way. She was a tomboy who loved playing in the mud, riding her bike without fear, and digging for worms in the backyard. But she was also a girly girl who would sneak into her older sister's rooms to borrow their lipstick and always insisted on wearing her sparkly princess crown around the house. She was brave enough to walk to her friend's house alone, but gentle enough to spend hours carefully arranging her Barbie dolls. Everyone who met her remarked on her survival instincts. She was what people called street smart for such a young child. She made friends easily, talked to everyone, and had a confidence that made adults smile. But there was one thing about LeeAnna that everyone knew. She hated wearing shoes. The moment she walked through the front door, off they came. She loved the feeling of grass under her feet, warm pavement on summer days, even the rough texture of gravel. Her mother, Kaylin, had long ago stopped fighting this battle. The Warner family had only recently made Chisholm their home. Kaylin Whitaker and Christopher Warner had both been through previous relationships before finding each other in late 1996. They'd moved in together. And when LeeAnna was born in January of '98, she completed their blended family. LeeAnna's older sisters, Carly and Whitney, 10 and 9 years old respectively, absolutely adored their baby sister. They were protective of her, patient with her endless questions, and proud to have Beener tagging along wherever they went. Christopher worked as an emergency medical technician, responding to calls throughout the Iron Range. Kaylin stayed home with the girls, managing the household on a tight budget, but making sure there was always love and laughter. The family had routines they cherished. Saturday rummage sales were tradition. Dinner together every single night. And strict but fair rules about where the children could go and when they had to be home. For LeeAnna, that meant she could visit friends within a few blocks of the house. But curfews were non-negotiable. When Kaylin said 5 o'clock, she meant 5 o'clock, not 5:01. Chisholm, Minnesota, in 2003, was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone. Nestled in the heart of the Mesabi Iron Range, about 200 miles north of Minneapolis. This town of 5,000 residents had been built on iron ore mining. The landscape told the story. beautiful lakes beside massive scars from mining operations, dense northern woods surrounding neighborhoods, and abandoned ore pits and shafts scattered throughout the area like industrial ghosts. But despite, or perhaps because of, this rugged setting, Chisholm operated on trust. Children played outside until dark. Neighbors chatted on front porches in the evenings. Doors were often left unlocked. This was a community where people looked out for each other. The Warner family lived on Southwest 2nd Street, in a working-class neighborhood where houses sat close together and kids rode bikes freely up and down the block. The friend LeeAnna was planning to visit that Saturday afternoon lived just down the street. You could literally see the house from the Warners' front window. It was a walk LeeAnna had made dozens of times. Out the front door. Turn left. Straight ahead. And there was her friend's driveway. Maybe a 2-minute walk for a 5-year-old. Maybe 3 if she stopped to look at something interesting along the way. But recently, LeeAnna had been acting a little differently. Nothing alarming. Just small things that parents notice but don't necessarily worry about. A few weeks earlier, Kaylin had come home to find LeeAnna playing with an expensive set of Barbie dolls complete with carrying case and accessories. They hadn't bought them for her. When Kaylin asked where they came from, LeeAnna said simply, "A little old lady gave them to me." Kaylin assumed it was someone from one of the rummage sales they frequented. People were generous, especially to a sweet child like LeeAnna. Then there were the nightmares. LeeAnna had started sleeping in her bedroom closet instead of her bed, claiming there were monsters outside the window. Kaylin and Christopher chalked it up to typical childhood fears. At 5 years old, imagination runs wild. 1 week before that, Saturday in June, LeeAnna had done something even stranger. She'd packed a small suitcase with her favorite things and told her parents she wanted to go live at her new family's house. Her parents had laughed it off. Kids say the oddest things. After all, they play pretend. They create entire fantasy worlds. These were just the quirks of a 5-year-old with an active imagination. The kind of stories families share and smile about later. Saturday, June 14th, 2003 started like any other summer weekend. The Warner family spent the morning and early afternoon at the Side Lake rummage sale, browsing through tables of children's clothes and toys under the warm Minnesota sun. By the time they got home around 4 in the afternoon, everyone was tired. Kaylin wanted LeeAnna to rest before dinner, but LeeAnna had other plans. "Can I go play at Ashley's house?" she asked, already heading toward the door. Ashley was her friend who lived just down the street. Kaylin glanced at the clock. 4:30. She looked out the window. She could see Ashley's house from right where she stood. "Be home by 5 o'clock," she said firmly. "Not 5:01. 5 o'clock." LeeAnna nodded, a big smile spreading across her face. She kicked off her shoes by the door, as she always did, and ran out barefoot into the summer afternoon. Kaylin Warner watched her youngest daughter's brown bob bouncing as she ran down the street, bare feet slapping the pavement. She turned back to putting away groceries from the rummage sale, already thinking about what to make for dinner. She expected LeeAnna back in 30 minutes. She would wait 22 years. 4:30 in the afternoon, Southwest 2nd Street in Chisholm. Minnesota was quiet, but it wasn't empty. It was a Saturday, and people were outside doing yard work, washing cars, enjoying the warm summer air. That evening, the town was hosting a concert and a motorcycle run, events that brought thousands of visitors into the small community. Cars were parked bumper to bumper along residential streets, and unfamiliar faces moved through neighborhoods they didn't live in, cutting across lawns and sidewalks in search of parking or a quicker route to the venues. LeeAnna Warner stepped off her front porch and onto the sun-warmed pavement. The heat beneath her bare feet, a sensation she loved. She knew exactly where she was going. Straight down the street. Past Mr. Henderson's blue house. Past the rusty pickup truck that was always parked on the corner. From where she stood, she could already see Ashley's house. The white one with the red mailbox. She skipped as she walked, humming a tune she'd heard on the radio earlier. Passing other children who were still playing in their yards. A boy rode past on his bike and waved. She waved back without slowing down. Everything felt ordinary. Familiar. Safe. These were her streets. This was her neighborhood. The walk took no more than 3 minutes. At 4:45, LeeAnna stood on Ashley's front porch and knocked 3 times. The way she always did. Rocking back and forth on her heels as she waited. When no one answered, she knocked again. A little louder this time. Then pressed her face to the window and peered inside. The house was dark. No one was home. Later, a neighbor would tell police she'd heard the knocking and had looked out her window to see a small girl in a blue denim dress standing on the porch. She'd gone back to hanging laundry, thinking nothing of it. It was just a child visiting a friend. LeeAnna turned away. Disappointed, but not upset. This had happened before. Sometimes Ashley's family went out without telling her. She still had 15 minutes before her 5 o'clock curfew. Plenty of time to head home and ask if Ashley could come over later. She stepped off the porch and started back the way she'd come. This was the last time anyone saw her walking of her own free will, between 4:50 and 5 o'clock. Several witnesses would later tell police they'd seen a small girl in a blue dress walking along Southwest 2nd Street. Mrs. Johnson, who lived halfway between Ashley's house and the Warner home, remembered it especially clearly. She had been in her front yard, hanging sheets on the clothesline, and noticed LeeAnna walking at a normal pace. Not running. Not frightened. Just heading home. Mrs. Johnson bent down to grab another sheet from her laundry basket. It took 2, maybe 3 minutes. When she looked up again, the street was empty. The little girl in the blue dress was gone. At exactly 5 o'clock, Kaylin Warner glanced at the clock on the kitchen wall, expecting her daughter to come through the door at any second. She continued unpacking items from the rummage sale, listening for the sound of bare feet on the front steps. 5:05 passed. LeeAnna hadn't come home yet. Kaylin wasn't worried. Not at first. Children lost track of time. Maybe LeeAnna had stopped to look at a caterpillar or examine a rock. That was just how 5-year-olds were. By 5:10, Kaylin walked to the window and looked down the street. It was quiet now. Most of the concert crowd already gone. She stepped onto the porch and called out, "LeeAnna, Beaner, time to come home." There was no response. She told herself LeeAnna must still be at Ashley's house, caught up in playing, unaware of the time. She'd be late, and she'd be in trouble. But she'd be safe. At 5:20, unease began to settle in Kaylin's chest. She walked quickly to Ashley's house, knocked on the door, then knocked again. No answer. She checked the yard, the driveway. The family car was gone. If Ashley wasn't home, and LeeAnna had come here, then where was she? Kaylin's walk back turned into a jog. Maybe LeeAnna had taken another route. Maybe she was already home. But when Kaylin burst through the front door, the house was empty. 5:30. 30 minutes past curfew. This wasn't like LeeAnna. Something was wrong. Kaylin retraced the route again, calling her daughter's name, knocking on neighbors' doors. People began to join the search. Children checking bushes and porches. Adults searching garages and backyards, convinced she must be nearby, hiding or hurt, but the distance was only a block and a half. Even if she had dawdled, It shouldn't have taken more than 10 minutes. And now it had been over an hour. By 6 o'clock, more than 20 people were searching. By 7, over 100. Cars crawled through the streets in slow grids. Voices echoed through neighborhoods. And flashlights appeared as daylight faded. What had begun as concern turned into fear. At 8 o'clock, Christopher Warner returned from an ambulance call to find neighbors everywhere and his wife sitting on the steps, crying. "She's gone," Caitlin said. "We can't find her." At Eamon. "How long?" he asked. "Since about 5:15. End quote. 3 hours. At 9 o'clock, Christopher made the call to police. The dispatcher's tone shifted quickly. Officers were already on their way. She told him not to touch anything in LeeAnna's room. Those words changed everything. By 9:30, police cars lined the street, and Chief Scott Erickson had responded personally. The case was escalated. Parents separated. Timelines repeated. At 10 o'clock, bloodhounds arrived and followed LeeAnna's scent from her home to Ashley's house, then back along Southwest 2nd Street. And then, at the edge of the road, the scent ended. The handler didn't need to explain what that meant. By midnight, hundreds had searched every possible place. By sunrise, LeeAnna Warner had been missing 12 hours. The only clue was a scent trail that stopped at the road, on a night when thousands of strangers had passed through town. And the vehicle that took her could have been anyone's, and gone anywhere. Dawn broke over Chisholm on June 15, 2003. Most of the searchers from the night before had gone home for a few hours of rest. But they returned as soon as the sun rose. The Warner family hadn't slept at all. By 6 in the morning, the police command center was fully operational. Chief Scott Erickson stood at the center of a room filled with maps, photographs, and timelines. The Federal Bureau of Investigation had been contacted. Any case involving possible transportation across state lines fell under their jurisdiction. The Amber Alert system, still relatively new in 2003, was activated, broadcasting LeeAnna's photograph and description across Minnesota and neighboring states. A press conference was scheduled for 8 o'clock. Meanwhile, search assets were deployed with military precision. More than 300 volunteers arrived, ready to spend their Sunday looking for a missing 5-year-old. They were organized into grid teams and assigned specific search areas. Professional tracking dogs from 3 counties arrived. Helicopters equipped with thermal imaging were scheduled to fly over wooded areas and abandoned mining sites. A dive team stood by in case local lakes needed to be searched, while all-terrain vehicles were prepared for dense forest areas inaccessible to cars. The Warner family remained in shock. Kaylin's eyes were red and swollen, her face pale. She hadn't eaten since Saturday lunch. Christopher kept his emotions tightly controlled, emergency responder training taking over, though his hands shook every time he lifted his coffee mug. Carly and Whitney, the older sisters, were kept inside the house, shielded from the chaos and the media. But they knew something terrible had happened. Their little sister was gone. At 8 o'clock, Chief Erickson stood before reporters, cameras, and community members. 5-year-old LeeAnna Warner has been missing since approximately 5:15 yesterday evening, he said, his voice steady. She was last seen walking on Southwest 2nd Street in Chisholm. She is 3 feet tall, weighs approximately 50 pounds, has brown hair and brown eyes, and was wearing a sleeveless blue denim dress with a belt, orange undergarments, and a flower earring with a red stone in her right ear. She was not wearing shoes. "If you's rapper," he paused before continuing. "We are treating this as a critical missing child case and are using every available resource. If anyone has any information, anything at all, please contact our tip line immediately. If he avoided words like taken or kidnapping, but everyone understood what he wasn't saying. This was not a child who had simply wandered off. The media response was immediate. Television crews from Duluth and Minneapolis descended on Chisholm. LeeAnna's photograph, the smiling image of her wearing a sparkly princess crown, appeared on every news station in the state. The tip line, established only hours earlier, already had more than 50 calls waiting. By 10 o'clock, the systematic search was underway. The abandoned iron ore mines surrounding Chisholm were the first priority. Some of the massive open pits stretched hundreds of feet deep. Rappelling teams descended into accessible areas, flashlights cutting through the darkness, while others explored crumbling underground shafts unused for decades. They found old equipment, animal bones, and decades of debris. They did not find LeeAnna. Search teams moved through the woods using grid formation. Volunteers spaced 10 feet apart, moving slowly through dense northern Minnesota forest. Every 30 seconds, someone called out her name. They checked beneath fallen trees, inside hollow logs, and anywhere a child might have sought shelter. They covered miles of terrain and found nothing. In residential areas, the search intensified further. Every house, garage, shed, and basement within a 5-mile radius was searched. Homeowners cooperated fully, many offering access before being asked. Investigators searched for hiding spots, disturbed earth, anything unusual, storm drains, crawl spaces, attics, abandoned vehicles. Anything capable of concealing a small body was examined. They found nothing. By June 16th, 48 hours after LeeAnna disappeared, the investigation began its inevitable shift. While physical searches continued, focus increasingly turned toward the criminal investigation. In missing child cases, the statistics are unforgiving. After 48 hours, the chances of finding a child alive drop sharply. Investigators began interviewing anyone who had been in the area on June 14th. Every registered offender within 50 miles was questioned, and their whereabouts verified. Limited traffic camera footage was reviewed. Police went door to door asking the same questions repeatedly. Did you see anything unusual? Any strangers? Any unfamiliar vehicles? The community was exhausted. Volunteers had searched for more than 60 hours, many without proper sleep or meals. Yet a core group refused to stop. They couldn't. Not while there was still a chance. Kaylin Warner refused to leave the search area. "What if she hears us calling?" she said. "What if she can hear my voice and I'm not there?" The forensic investigation was equally thorough. The Warner home was processed carefully. LeeAnna's bedroom was photographed from every angle. Hair samples and DNA swabs were collected for comparison purposes in case biological evidence surfaced elsewhere. Her pillowcase, clothing, and personal belongings were bagged and cataloged. There were no signs of forced entry or struggle, confirming investigators' belief that whatever happened had occurred outside. The route LeeAnna had walked was examined inch by inch. Sidewalks were inspected for fibers, blood, or torn fabric. Storm drains were checked. Photographs documented every tire track left by vehicles parked there that afternoon. But there had been hundreds of vehicles. The concert and motorcycle run had flooded the area with strangers, making it nearly impossible to distinguish meaningful evidence from background noise. One puzzling detail emerged. On Ashley's porch, witnesses reported seeing a pair of jelly shoes, the kind popular with young girls at the time. LeeAnna had left home barefoot, and her own shoes remained by the front door. So whose shoes were they? The shoes were collected and tested. Weeks later, results were inconclusive. DNA was present, but none that could be definitively linked to LeeAnna. The question remained unanswered. Witness interviews continued. Mrs. Johnson was interviewed repeatedly and remained certain, a little girl in a blue dress, walking calmly, not frightened. She'd look down for laundry, and when she looked up, the girl was gone. Other witnesses offered fragments. A man walking his dog saw nothing. A teenager washing his car thought he might have seen a little girl. A woman leaving for work said the street was empty. Somewhere in a 10 to 15-minute window, LeeAnna Warner vanished. The tip line flooded with calls. Police sketch artists produced composites based on witness descriptions. Different men, different vehicles. None were identified. No names, no license plates. They remained ghosts. Then came the discovery that reframed the case. During interviews, detectives asked if LeeAnna had shown unusual behavior before she disappeared. Kaylin straightened. Actually, yes. She had these new Barbie dolls 2 weeks earlier. LeeAnna had been playing with an expensive Barbie carrying case they hadn't purchased. She said a little old lady had given it to her. No one else had seen this woman. No one could identify her. She was another ghost. Christopher then remembered that LeeAnna had begun sleeping in her closet, afraid of monsters outside her window. At the time, it seemed like normal childhood fear. Now investigators wondered if she'd seen something real. The most chilling detail came last. A week before she disappeared, LeeAnna had packed a small suitcase and told her parents she wanted to go live with her new family. End of phrase. At the time, they laughed. Now, sitting with investigators, they understood. These weren't random behaviors. They were classic signs of grooming. Someone had been preparing LeeAnna, offering gifts, promising a new life, earning her trust. The realization was devastating. The working theory became clear. LeeAnna Warner had not been taken randomly. She had been targeted. The only question left was, by whom? The moment Matthew James Curtis's name appeared in the police database, every investigator working the LeeAnna Warner case stopped. Curtis was 24 years old and lived in Chisholm, in the same neighborhood where LeeAnna had vanished. His address was not just within walking distance, but within watching distance of the route LeeAnna had taken that Saturday afternoon in June. He had been arrested as part of a Minnesota Internet Crimes Against Children task force operation, caught downloading illegal images involving minors. To investigators, this did not feel coincidental. This felt like a real suspect. Curtis was brought in for questioning. Over several days in September 2003, detectives questioned him repeatedly about June 14th, where he had been that afternoon, whether he knew the Warner family, whether he had ever seen or spoken to LeeAnna. Curtis denied any connection. He claimed he didn't know LeeAnna Warner, had never seen her, and knew nothing about her disappearance, but he could not, or would not, to provide a clear alibi for where he had been around 5 o'clock that evening. That alone was enough for a search warrant. Police seized Curtis's pickup truck and subjected it to an exhaustive forensic examination. The interior was vacuumed for hair and fibers. DNA swabs were taken from every surface. The truck bed was inspected for signs of cleaning or biological residue, and luminol was used to search for traces of blood. His home was searched thoroughly, and his computers were confiscated, with forensic analysts beginning the slow work of recovering deleted files and examining his internet history. Kaylin Warner was told police had a promising suspect. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to feel hope. Maybe Curtis would confess. Maybe he would tell them where LeeAnna was. Maybe the nightmare would finally end. But forensic testing took time. In 2003, DNA analysis moved slowly. The Warner family waited. The town waited. On September 23, 2003, the morning Curtis was scheduled to appear in court. A farmer found his pickup truck parked on a rural road outside Chisholm. Matthew James Curtis was inside, deceased. A plastic bag had been pulled over his head and secured tightly around his neck. The medical examiner ruled the death self-inflicted, officially classified as ending one's own life by suffocation. To much of the community, Curtis's death felt like an admission of guilt. He had taken LeeAnna. He had done something unspeakable. Rather than face trial, he had chosen silence. Now there would be no confession, no answers, no justice. But the investigative reality was less satisfying. Forensic results from Curtis's truck came back after his death, and there was no evidence, none, that LeeAnna Warner had ever been inside. No DNA, no hair, no fibers, no blood. Analysis of his computers confirmed the illegal material he had been charged with possessing, but revealed nothing tying him to LeeAnna. There were no photos of her, no documents, no searches, no note, no explanation. To police, only two possibilities remained. Either Curtis had nothing to do with LeeAnna's disappearance, or he had been meticulous beyond expectation. Some in Chisholm refused to believe the death was self-inflicted. Rumors spread that Curtis had been silenced, that others were involved, that he knew something he couldn't be allowed to say. Investigators found no evidence supporting these theories. But doubt lingered for years. With Curtis gone and no evidence linking him to LeeAnna, the investigation stalled. The case went cold. In the summer of 2004, police mounted another search, this time using advanced cadaver dogs trained to detect human remains long after death. Areas previously searched were covered again. Many of the same volunteers returned, walking grid patterns through woods, rechecking abandoned mines, retracing ground already walked. They hoped something had been missed. Nothing was found. By winter, large-scale searches were suspended. The ground froze. The lakes iced over. Chief Erickson addressed the media. "We are not giving up on LeeAnna Warner," he said. "But without new information, there is only so much we can do." 18 Self of the Rue. In May of 2005, another name entered the conversation: Joseph Edward Duncan III, a serial predator arrested in Idaho after the Groney family murders, was found to have an encrypted document on his computer referencing LeeAnna Warner. Minnesota investigators were alerted immediately. Duncan kept an online journal called Blogging the Fifth Nail. In a February 2004 entry, he wrote about being afraid I'm going to be blamed for the disappearance of LeeAnna Warner, expressing anger at speculation. Why would a man living nearly 200 miles away be writing about her? Investigators reconstructed Duncan's movements, examined financial records and phone data, and attempted to place him in Chisholm on June 14th. They could not. But Duncan's encrypted files remained troubling. He claimed they contained confessions to numerous crimes. Federal agencies attempted to break the encryption and failed. Duncan refused to provide the password. When Duncan died in prison in 2021, the files died with him. Whether they contain anything about LeeAnna Warner is something no one will ever know. The years passed. The case stayed open but stagnant. Tips dwindled. Most came from psychics or online sleuths. None led anywhere. Chief Scott Erickson retired in 2015, haunted by the case that never resolved. His successor, Vern Manor, reviewed the 1,500-page file and admitted publicly that investigators had persons of interest. But no evidence. Technology advanced. Genetic genealogy solved cold cases nationwide, but those tools required DNA. The LeeAnna Warner case had none. The Warner family slowly fell apart. Kaylin Warner's grief consumed her. Every January 21st, LeeAnna's birthday, she bought gifts and stored them away for when she comes home. Over time, the gifts changed. Dolls became books. Books became jewelry. Marking the years LeeAnna never lived, Christopher coped by staying away, burying himself in work. The marriage eroded under grief and blame. Eventually, they left Chisholm. Carly and Whitney grew up carrying their sister's absence. As adults, they vowed never to stop looking. They maintained online pages, contacted podcasts, shared age-progressed images, and kept LeeAnna's name alive. Because if they didn't remember her, no one would. Every night, Kaylin turned on the porch light, even after moving away. The ritual remained. The light stayed on, night after night, for nearly 20 years. In 2022, Kaylin Whitaker was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. With little time left, she made her daughters promise they would keep searching. "I never stopped," she whispered, "but I'm out of time. Thanks for watching." Unquote. On December 10th, 2022, Kaylin died at 56. For the first time since June 14th, 2003. The porch light went dark, but the promise did not. The promise Carly and Whitney made to their dying mother became the catalyst that pulled LeeAnna Warner's case back from the shadows of forgotten tragedies. In the weeks after Kaylin's funeral, the sisters sat together in the house where the porch light had burned for 19 years. The light was off now, but something else had ignited. A determination that bordered on obsession. Their mother had spent 2 decades searching. Now it was their turn. They began with social media, creating posts that paired old photographs with new age progression images. The hashtag #FindLeeAnnaWarner began appearing across multiple platforms, but Carly and Whitney knew social media alone wouldn't be enough. They needed people who understood cold cases, who had audiences that cared about unresolved mysteries. That's when they remembered the podcast. A year before their mother died, True Crime Garage had released a 2-part series on LeeAnna's disappearance. The first episode reconstructed her last walk on that June afternoon in 2003 with painstaking detail, making it feel immediate and urgent. The second examined the suspects: Matthew Curtis and his timing, Joseph Duncan and his encrypted secrets, the 3 unidentified men who'd never been named. The series had reached hundreds of thousands of listeners. But like most true crime content, it had eventually faded beneath newer cases. Carly and Whitney began directing people back to those episodes, adding their own commentary about their mother's death and the promise they'd made. The response was overwhelming. Comments flooded in from people who'd never heard LeeAnna's name before. How is this case not solved? Why isn't this getting more attention? What can we do to help? The Chisholm Police Department's tip line, which had been receiving perhaps 1 call a month, suddenly logged 35 calls in a single week. Chief Vukad reassigned a detective to handle the influx. Most tips were well-intentioned but unhelpful. Claimed sightings decades earlier, psychic visions, elaborate conspiracy theories. But buried among them were a few worth examining. A man who'd attended the motorcycle rally in 2003 and remembered seeing a girl matching LeeAnna's description speaking to someone near a parked vehicle. A woman who'd been a teenager at the time and had never told anyone she'd seen a rusty pickup circling the neighborhood that afternoon. Nothing concrete emerged, but something important had changed. People were paying attention again. In the spring of 2023, the sisters took their most significant step. They submitted DNA samples to both 23andMe and Ancestry. Go, com, tracked. The logic was simple and heartbreaking. If LeeAnna was alive, raised under another name, she might one day take a DNA test out of curiosity, never knowing her sisters were waiting on the other end. The alternative was darker but potentially useful. If the person who took LeeAnna had relatives who'd submitted DNA, genealogy databases might reveal a connection, just as they had in the Golden State Killer case. Every few weeks, a notification appeared on Carly's phone. You have a new DNA match. Every time, her heart seized. Every time, she opened the app with shaking hands. And every time, it was someone irrelevant. A distant cousin in Oregon. A tenuous genealogical connection in Michigan. Never LeeAnna. But they kept checking. They kept hoping. Meanwhile, Chief Foucault assigned investigators to re-examine old evidence using modern methods. The Bloodhound tracking report from 2003 was sent to the FBI's Human Scent Evidence Team for contemporary analysis. A new generation of experts reviewed the handler's notes, weather data, wind patterns, temperature, humidity, and the exact location where the scent ended. Their conclusion reinforced earlier suspicions, but added clarity. The pattern was consistent with rapid vehicle entry. More than that, the scent disruption suggested the vehicle had been running when LeeAnna entered or was placed inside. Engine exhaust would have destroyed the trail almost instantly. Someone had been waiting. Engine on. Ready to leave. The composite sketches of the unidentified men were digitized and run through modern facial recognition software. Comparing them against millions of images, the results were inconclusive. Witness sketches based on decades-old memories proved too imprecise. Dozens of potential matches were investigated. None held. Matthew Curtis's case resurfaced with new questions. A detective noted that Curtis had died exactly 48 hours after learning DNA results from his truck were negative. Some believed his death was an admission of guilt. Others wondered if it was despair over facing prison for unrelated crimes. The timing coincidental. Conspiracy theories persisted. But reanalysis of scene photographs by modern forensic pathologists remained consistent with self-infliction. The lack of a note continued to trouble investigators. Perhaps most frustrating was the realization that evidence from Curtis's truck could not be retested. Advances in touch DNA and trace recovery meant material invisible in 2003 might now yield results. But the biological samples had been destroyed after the case was ruled unrelated. Reports could be reread. Evidence could not be recreated. Joseph Duncan's encrypted files remained inaccessible. The FBI had failed to crack them when he was alive. And nothing had changed. Duncan died in 2021, taking the password with him. Whether those files contained information about LeeAnna would never be known. The grooming indicators were reassessed by modern behavioral specialists. With 2 decades of advancement in understanding predatory behavior, the pattern appeared nearly textbook. Gifts to establish trust. Fear suggesting surveillance. Psychological preparation for leaving. A suitcase packed. Talk of a new family. Ollie. These were not coincidences. They were steps. Analysts concluded LeeAnna had likely been targeted weeks or months before June 14th. Possibly at public places like rummage sales, the predator had gained her trust, surveilled her home, planted ideas of a better life elsewhere. On June 14th, when she walked home alone, they were waiting. She may have recognized the vehicle. She may have entered willingly, believing she was going somewhere safe. That theory explained everything. No screams. No struggle. No witnesses. Then, in December of 2025, the call came. There are bones in a basement, he says Andres says. The address was an abandoned house in Chisholm scheduled for demolition. Within an hour, Investigators were on scene. The basement's dirt floor showed signs of old disturbance. Excavation revealed bone fragments wrapped in deteriorated fabric. Chief Vucad called Carly and Whitney personally. For days, Minnesota waited. The story went national. Then the results came. The remains were animal. Likely deer. Possibly a large dog. Not human. Not a child. Relief and devastation arrived together. The sisters released a statement thanking law enforcement. The search continues. We will never stop looking. What the incident proved was this. 22 years later, the case was still alive. Tips were still taken seriously. Resources were still deployed immediately. Chief Vucad later said, "We have more tools than ever before. What we need is that one piece of information, and we believe someone out there has it." I was save had Birdie do. The case file now contained 1,700 leads. All investigated. All documented. Most eliminated. A few unresolved. The theories remained unchanged. Stranger abduction. Grooming. Curtis. Duncan. Trafficking. Or the possibility Carly and Whitney clung to. That LeeAnna was alive. 27 years old. Unaware that two sisters were searching for her. As January of 2026 ended, LeeAnna Susan Marie Warner had been missing for 22 years, 7 months, and 12 days. The case remained suspended between hope and despair, between a barefoot 5-year-old walking down a summer street and the vast, uncharted silence that followed. When you strip away the speculation and theories, when you remove the suspicious suspects and tantalizing possibilities, what remains is devastatingly simple. On June 14, 2003, sometime between 5 o'clock and 5:15 in the evening, LeeAnna Warner walked down Southwest 2nd Street in Chisholm, Minnesota, and ceased to exist in any verifiable way. The last person to see her was a neighbor hanging laundry. The walk from her friend's house to her own should have taken 3 minutes. Maybe 4. Somewhere in that impossibly short window, she vanished so completely that 22 years of searching has produced nothing. Not a piece of clothing. Not a witness to whatever happened. Not a single fiber, hair, or drop of blood. Only absence. The bloodhounds provided investigators with one concrete clue, a scent trail ending at a roadside, suggesting vehicle involvement. Everything else has been interpretation, educated guesses, theories built from fragments of behavioral evidence and suspicious timing. Law enforcement consensus holds that LeeAnna didn't wander off. The search was too thorough for that explanation to stand. She is either deceased and hidden in a location that has never been found, or she is alive somewhere with no knowledge of her true identity. Those are the only possibilities consistent with the evidence. And the evidence is almost entirely defined by what isn't there. For those left behind, the impact has been measured in different currencies. Carly Van Loo is 34 now. She works night shifts at a Minnesota hospital, saving lives while her sister remains lost. Her 2 children know they have an aunt who disappeared before they were born. They've seen the photographs, heard the stories. You learn the hard truth that sometimes terrible things happen, and no one can fix them. Every June 14th, Carly posts about LeeAnna on social media. The responses grow fewer each year, but she keeps posting anyway. It's part of the promise. Whitney Shupp teaches elementary school in Wisconsin. She's 33. A mother of 3 children raised with a heightened awareness of danger that borders on anxiety. Whitney knows it isn't healthy. But when her children are late or briefly out of sight, her mind returns instantly to that afternoon in 2003. Therapy has helped her understand it intellectually. But knowledge doesn't stop the body from reacting when a child isn't where they're supposed to be. Both sisters submit updated DNA samples whenever technology advances. Both check genealogy databases compulsively, hoping against logic that one day LeeAnna's name will appear. Both work to keep their mother's memory and their sister's case alive, even as the world moves on to newer tragedies. Christopher Warner is in his 50s now, remarried, living quietly far from Minnesota. According to his daughters, he doesn't talk about LeeAnna, the guilt of being on that ambulance call, of not being there when his family needed him, of missing warning signs that only seem obvious in hindsight. It's too heavy. He copes by compartmentalizing, by treating that summer afternoon as something that happened to another version of himself. The sisters understand, even if they wish he'd shared the burden instead of retreating from it. Chisholm itself carries permanent scars. The town hasn't grown in 20 years. If anything, it has slowly shrunk as young people leave for larger cities. The cultural shift that began with LeeAnna's disappearance never reversed. Parents who once allowed unsupervised play now keep children close. The Iron Range trust culture that defined the community for generations has been replaced by locks, caution, and fear. Every June 14th, a vigil is held in the park. Around 20 people attend now, down from the thousands who gathered in the early years. Most are longtime residents who remember searching the woods, calling LeeAnna's name. A few are true crime followers drawn in by podcasts or documentaries. Candles are lit, prayers are said. Teddy bears are left beneath a plaque that reads, LeeAnna Warner, January 21st, 1998, June 14th, 2003. Never forgotten. The date range is aspirational. June 14th was when she disappeared, not when she died. But without a body or confirmation, the plaque serves as the closest thing to a grave marker. The case has contributed to changes in how missing children investigations are handled. Responses are faster. Evidence preservation is stricter. Training includes recognizing grooming behaviors. Forensic genealogy has become standard. None of it brings LeeAnna back, but it has helped solve other cases, spared other families decades of uncertainty. Technology continues to advance. DNA analysis grows more sensitive. Facial recognition improves. Databases expand. Each breakthrough brings a flicker of hope, but hope still requires something to work with. The LeeAnna Warner case remains defined by having nothing. No crime scene. No physical evidence. No body. You can't apply cutting-edge science to absence. The Chisholm Police Department maintains the case is active. Chief Vukad meant it when he said it remained a priority. A detective regularly reviews the file, follows up on tips, re-examines evidence when technology allows. The department's budget still allocates resources for LeeAnna's case, but reality persists. After 22 years, the chances diminish. Witnesses age. Memories fade. People who might know something die without ever speaking. Evidence degrades beyond recovery. The window for answers narrows, even as the commitment remains. Carly and Whitney know this. They understand they may spend their lives searching, just as their mother did, without ever knowing what happened. The promise they made may be impossible to fulfill, but giving up, accepting that LeeAnna will remain a question mark forever, is unthinkable. The age progression images show LeeAnna as she might look today. 27 years old, the dimple on her left shoulder and the mole above her left ankle still there. But the images are only educated guesses. If LeeAnna is alive, she may look nothing like them. She could be anywhere, under any name, unremarkable in a crowd of millions. Or she has been gone since that June afternoon. Her remains hidden somewhere in northern Minnesota. An abandoned mine. An unmarked grave. a place never searched or searched and missed. Not knowing is its own form of torture. Grief has stages. Limbo does not. It stretches endlessly, an unresolved present where only the number of years changes. Kaylin Warner lived in that limbo for 19 years. It broke her piece by piece until illness ended the waiting. Her final plea was simple: don't stop searching. Don't let LeeAnna disappear twice. Once from the street, once from memory. Her daughters heard her. They made that promise, and they keep it the only way they can. By refusing to move on. By treating every June 14th as fresh. By holding on to hope that defies logic. Because what else is there? 22 years ago, a barefoot 5-year-old walked down a residential street on a summer afternoon. Cars lined the curbs. Strangers filled the town. Neighbors tended their yards. And somehow, in broad daylight, LeeAnna Warner vanished so completely that decades of investigation have produced only questions. Who took her? Where did they go? Why is there no evidence? No witness? No trace? We still don't know. After 1,700 leads and countless hours, the case remains open. The tip line: if this story moved you, if you believe LeeAnna Warner deserves to be remembered, then subscribe to this channel right now. Every subscription helps push these forgotten cases back into the light where they belong. Hit that notification bell so you never miss when we cover another unsolved mystery that needs your attention. Share this video with someone who cares about justice. Comment below if you have theories, insights, or information about LeeAnna's case.